Normally, I don't cover stories like this. I don't even like to go watch movies like this because I grew up Catholic, and those of us who are Catholic are pretty superstitious about this sort of stuff. So those of you, by the way, this isn't actually Catholic. This is going to be Anglican, Episcopal, Church of England, whatever, however you want to call it, right? Ah, these stories scare the fuck out of me. Every time I have a boyfriend who's like, "Hey, let's go see Exorcist," or "Let's go see some other like spiritual movie," I hate watching this kind of shit. I absolutely hate it. But this is fascinating because it's a true story, right? 37 demons. Oh my god, even. So, like, I don't know what to believe, right? Like, I have certain religious beliefs, and I have fears because of what I've been told throughout my life about these types of things. But, um, I don't know if this is truly what the church believes it to be or if it's like mental illness. I'm not positive, but it certainly makes me scared as a Catholic myself, that this sort of thing might be possible, right?
In early 1974, 31-year-old Michael Taylor was living happily with his wife Christine and their 5 children in Ossett, which is a small town in central England. Michael was described as a great father and a great husband who had an excellent sense of humor. In fact, neighbors, whenever they would walk past the Taylor household, would say you could often hear the sound of Michael laughing or the sound of him telling jokes to his family. But in April of that year, everything changed for the Taylor family. Michael had been doing some home repairs when he fell off of a ladder and he hurt his back. The injury itself was fairly minor, but it resulted in chronic pain. And this chronic pain quickly changed how Michael behaved. Michael went from being this cheerful, funny, happy guy to being sad and depressed. And he was so irritable that his family could barely be around him because he would lash out at them. Now, the Taylor family was not a religious family. However, most families who lived in Ossett at that time were. And so when one of Michael's friends found out about how poorly Michael was doing, they approached Michael and said, you know, you really ought to turn to religion for help and for guidance in this difficult time. And they also told him specifically that he really ought to check out this.
I almost wonder. Okay, so like I haven't finished this whole story yet, but I almost wonder if the combination of the chronic pain and the religious influence actually caused whatever happened here, because um being a part of a religion does cause superstition. It causes fear. It um it can cause irrational thoughts, right? um so I almost wonder if, the desperation of being in so much pain and trying to find solace, trying to find out how you get through. Because, like, obviously, I'm in chronic pain right now, but there's no way that I would do something like this, right? Because I think for most of us who are experiencing chronic pain, we try and find things that make us happy. Absolutely. Like, for instance, I like to sing. So therefore I'm going to karaoke bars and stuff, right? Not very often though, because oftentimes I'm in too much pain to actually go. But I'm looking for like little things that will make me happy, right? But I think that when you combine chronic pain with religious fervor, that could be a pretty bad combination, right?
one particular Christian group. It was called the Christian Fellowship Group, and all it was a prayer group for Christians who wanted more religious support beyond just going to church on Sundays. But this friend of Michael's told him that the real draw of this group was the group's leader. Her name was Marie Robinson, and she was this 21-year-old, extremely friendly and energetic and charismatic person who just had this incredible way of making all of her members really feel like they belonged. And so Michael's friend was telling him that he really thought Marie could be the difference maker for him, that she could help him get back to normal. And so Michael, he trusted this friend, and he really didn't have much to lose at this point. He was already at rock bottom, and so he agrees to go check this group out. So on September 12th of that year, Michael makes his way to the church.
Okay, so let's add this up. I'm trying to break down this story logically so that it doesn't freak me out as a Catholic, right? So you have a religious leader. She's quite young. She's only 21 years old. And you have an older gentleman, a married older gentleman, who is experiencing chronic pain. But when he's in this group, in her presence, he feels better about himself and he forgets about his pain, right? I think, for those of us who are chronic pain sufferers, we do know that there's maybe one or two people who are a part of our lives that help us at least not think about how much pain we're in, right? So there's a bit of potentially, and I don't know if we're going to get here because I don't know how this story is going to end, right? By the way, the other two stories on this video are pretty insane too. Like the one right before this is a woman who was so freaked out about bungee jumping that she didn't wait for them to hook up the actual cord and she dropped to her death. I'm also scared of heights. Anywho, that was terrifying. But at least, you know what? She had a heart attack on the way down, so she didn't actually die from the impact. I don't know if that's better or worse. I'm not sure. I really don't know. But anyway, I think that what we're walking into with this story is some level of manipulation. Some level of... I hope that's what... Because, I am superstitious when it comes to religion. So let's see what happens here.
Church where this fellowship group is held. He goes inside and he makes his way to one of the back rooms in the church. And when he goes inside, he sees there's a ring of people sitting in a circle, about 20 people. And as soon as they see Michael coming in the room, they all stand up and they open their arms up and they say, "Come on, come sit down with us. Welcome to the group." And then the woman who had to be Marie, she stands up and she looks at Michael, huge smile on her face, and she encourages him to come over and sit right next to me. "Welcome. We'd love to have you join our group." And so Michael, for the first time in ages, is smiling as he strides across the room and sits down right next to Marie. And then as Marie began to lead the group in prayer, Michael did not feel his chronic pain. He just felt happy again. But when the meeting was over and Michael went back home again, the pain and depression came flooding back.
Right.
It was like the only place he could be happy was inside of the church at this fellowship group. And so over the next couple of weeks...
Well, yeah, because when you have the euphoric sensation of a good experience like that, it makes you forget a little bit of the pain. And when you get back to your normal life, right, it's like, oh, I can feel it again. I can wholeheartedly feel it. And I'm also probably feeling anxiety from my current situation, and I feel limited. I feel like I can't get things accomplished. So there's a lot of negative thoughts that return to you after a positive experience. It becomes somewhat... I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. But I guess that this would be a very similar feeling to being bipolar, right? That you have a moment of happiness that helps you forget this chronic pain, and then you go back to your normal existence, and you're like, how am I gonna work? How am I gonna get my bills paid? how, like all of these things keep flooding back to you at this point because you're in a lot of pain, and it's very frustrating. It's an incredibly frustrating situation to figure out, like, what do you do after you've damaged a big body part? And damaging your back that's pretty serious, right? Even though, I'm kind of having the same problem with this. Like, they're saying that they didn't have any, like, noticeable damage. I clearly have some level of nerve damage, yet I've not been able to get nerve testing, right? And every other test came up negative. Like, there's no like the CT scan, the MRI, the ultrasound, all of that came back normal for me, but I have yet to get nerve testing. And that's probably, in my opinion, I'm not a doctor, but in my opinion, it's probably nerve damage, because I sustained a pretty sizable blunt force trauma to the back of my left knee. And it has expanded up and down my leg, right? And it goes all the way into my back and my abdomen. So I've gone through the physical therapy. I've been, doing everything that they ask me to do. And I can understand how frustrating it would be, and how you'd be seeking out some sort of solutions, resolutions. And it's unfortunate that somebody actually suggested religion for somebody who's suffering from a medical condition. That's, you need science. You need science, right?
Michael completely prioritized this group. He went to all of their meetings, and over the course of these couple of weeks, Michael became very close with Marie, and apparently Marie became very close with Michael, to the point where the two of them would stay after the meetings were over, and just those two would sequester themselves in quiet prayer. No one knew what they did in there, but it just seemed like they were developing a real relationship. And in fact, many people in this group suspected they were having an affair. And before long, the rumors in the church had spread outside and were all over Ossett. And then before long, Christine, Michael's wife, was hearing from a friend or a neighbor that apparently Michael was having an affair with Marie. Now, Christine had already suspected her husband was having an affair with Marie, because Marie was the only thing Michael talked about when he got home. So on October 1st of that year, only a couple of weeks after Michael had first attended this group, Christine waited until Michael had left the house to head out to one of the group meetings. And then Christine hopped in her car and she followed him to the church. And when she got there, she parked her car, she took a deep breath, and then she got out. She made her way to the front doors of the church, and she stormed inside. And she found the room where these meetings were held. She barges in, and she points at her husband, and she says, "I know you're having an affair with Marie, and you're going to admit it in front of this whole group." And Michael, who's sitting with his back to his wife in one of the chairs, he stands up, and instead of addressing his wife, who's accused him of infidelity, he turns and looks at Marie on the other side of the room. And when Marie made eye contact with Michael, she screamed. She would later say Michael did not look human. He looked like a beast, and he had wild eyes. And so as Michael is standing there staring at Marie with this very aggressive face, he began breaking out in tongues. Speaking in tongues is where the speaker will be saying or uttering words or sounds that sound like language, but the speaker doesn't know what they...
I feel like this is bullshit. Like, he just got called out for infidelity in a public setting. And I've known many men who have absolute tantrums when they get called out on the truth. They go into screaming fits. And I don't want to believe that every single one of these men are possessed by demons. You know what I'm saying? I feel like this was absolutely just a fucking facade to try and distract from the fact that he just went through a traumatic event of being called out in public, and now he's trying to be like, no, I'm possessed by demons, right?
mean. The idea is some entity has come inside of their body, and this entity is dictating their speech. And so Michael is broken out in tongues. He's barking these words and sounds at Marie, and everyone inside of the room has no idea what to make of this. Everything has happened so suddenly, and it's so surprising. You have the wife suddenly coming in and aggressively accusing her husband of cheating, and Michael is not responding to it, and he's acting totally crazy. And then, before anyone can do anything, Michael goes from just barking in strange languages at Marie to suddenly rushing across the room as if he's going to attack her. And when he does that, the rest of the members jump on top of him and hold him down. And despite there being like 10 or 15 people holding him down, Michael is still trying to get up, and he's screaming and snarling and yelling at Marie. And then Marie suddenly breaks out into tongues too. And it's only then that Michael stops trying to force himself up out of this pig pile that's on top of him, and instead he just continues to speak in tongues to her. And so the two of them are looking at each other.
Yeah, here's the thing. First of all, I think she was probably manipulating him. But second of all, I think the reason that he probably stopped his supposed attack is that she validated him by speaking in tongues back to him, right? She basically validated his excuse for his behavior. And so now everybody else in the room is confused except for these two people who are probably having an affair. Let's be real.
Speaking in tongues, and the rest of the group is just totally dumbfounded, and so they just begin praying. And then after about an hour, Michael just collapses. It's like he went unconscious. And at that point, everybody in the room just goes silent, and they look at Michael, and then Michael kind of opens his eyes, and it's almost like he's waking up, and he begins looking around frantically, trying to figure out what had just happened. Michael would claim he had no memory of what had just happened to him.
Right.
And so at this point, Marie would tell him and Christine that she believed Michael was possessed by a demonic force, and the only thing they could do at this point would be to perform an exorcism. An exorcism is an expulsion or attempted expulsion of a supposedly evil spirit inside of a person or a place. Michael and Christine were at a loss. They had no idea what to do in this situation. They were both kind of in shock for very different reasons, and so they just kind of deferred to Marie's judgment and said, yeah, I think an exorcism is the way to go. So Christine and Michael just leave the church and go home, and then the next morning, Marie would get in touch with the Anglican Church of England and would request an exorcism. And after...
Isn't that amazing that, okay, so Marie is taking initiative to try and solve the problem that looks like it might have been orchestrated, right? Rather than coordinating with his actual wife and saying, hey, here's what I think is wrong and here's what I think you should do, right? So she's making basically like a medical judgment. Because, this is like, when you look at a married couple, they have the ability to make medical calls for each other if something's going wrong, right? And financial judgments for each other when they're going wrong. We're talking about a woman who's completely outside of this marriage, who is arranging things for this man without coordinating with his wife, right? So that just further, look, I haven't gotten to the end of the story, so I don't know how this is going to go, but that further substantiates to me that there probably was an affair going on. There was some level of manipulation going on. She's obviously a lot younger than him, but she was a religious leader, and that is somehow, sometimes how they do, right, is manipulation. That's sometimes how it goes. I'm surprised it was such a well-established church, though. We're talking Church of England,
Hearing about what was going on with Michael, the Anglican Church would say, yeah, that does sound like he needs an exorcism. And so the following day, they would send out two of their best exorcists named Peter and Raymond. And so Peter and Raymond, they get to Ossett, they go to Michael's house, and they observe him. And very quickly, they determine that it does seem like Michael is possessed by at least one demonic force.
Okay.
And so they tell Michael, the only thing we can do here is perform this exorcism, but we need you to agree to it. And so Michael Michael says, okay, yeah, I agree to this exorcism, and so would his wife, because she at this point is just completely unsure what to do. She's just going along for the ride. So a day later, on October 4th at 10 p.m., Michael, his wife, and the rest of the members of this fellowship group, along with Peter and Raymond, they would all meet at this other church in a neighboring town. And as soon as Michael had been positioned in the middle of this group in this chair, Peter and Raymond began the ritual by praying. And as soon as they did, Michael began screaming out in tongues, and he began writhing around, and he fell to the ground, and he began contorting his body in grotesque positions, as if the words Peter and Raymond were saying were physically harming Michael. And so after 8 hours of this, during which they had to actually tie Michael down to prevent him from hurting other members or hurting himself, after 8 hours, they finally just came to a stop. Peter and Raymond were exhausted. It looked very much like Michael too was exhausted. And as soon as they stopped the ritual, Michael just kind of collapsed on the ground as if he had fallen unconscious. And then at some point he kind of wakes up and he's looking around wildly. He's still tied down to the ground and he's acting like he has no idea what's just happened. And at this point, Peter and Raymond, they tell him that, the exorcism was mostly successful. We identified 40 demons inside of you, and this exorcism was able to expel 37 of them. So that means there's still 3 demons inside of you. Now, we can't do it right now. We're too tired. You're too exhausted. So go home, get some rest, and tomorrow we will finish this exorcism. We will get rid of those 3 demons, and you will be just fine. And so,
How do y'all figure that out? These exorcism specialists. How do you, like, what do you, do you see things that we don't see? Like, how did you figure that out? That you somehow removed 37 demons out of this guy's body? How do you figure that out?
Michael and Christine, they get their things and they leave the church and they head home. A few hours later, around noon, a woman who lived near where Michael Taylor and his family lived thought she heard something strange outside of her house. It sounded like someone yelling. And so she went to the front of the house and she pulled the curtain aside on one of her windows. And outside, walking down the street completely naked, covered in blood, was Michael Taylor. And he was saying something about Satan. And so this woman, she calls the police. The police show up and they find Michael. He had curled up on the sidewalk outside of this woman's house, and he was giggling like a child in the fetal position. And so the police approach him, and at some point Michael apparently snaps out of it, and he starts looking up at the police like he has no idea what's going on, and eventually they would get him to tell them his name and where he lived. And so after calling in backup to deal with Michael, the responding officers made their way to Michael's residence. And so they go inside, and immediately, as soon as they see what's in there, one of the officers just turns around and runs outside and begins dry heaving. The inside of the Taylor family home would become one of the most infamous crime scenes in English history. A few hours
Oh, God. Okay.
earlier, when Michael and his wife had come home from the exorcism, they had gone inside, and then Michael had fallen into one of his trances and began beating his wife. And then at some point, she fell to the ground and either was dead or was in the process of dying, at which point Michael jumped on top of her, and using only his hands, he ripped her face off and flung it across the room. And then as she's laying there, bleeding to death, he began rubbing her blood all over his body. And then after she had finally died, he tracked down the family dog and killed the dog as well. Fortunately, their 5 children were not home at the time of this attack, and so they were unharmed. During Michael's trial, the prosecution and the defense,
Fortunately, seems very convenient that everybody already suspected him of having an affair with this religious leader. And he had an opportunity where only his wife was home and made it look like he was crazy and possessed by demons, right? So that he could kill her, right? Is that what we're getting to here? That's what we're getting to here, is that he used this as an excuse to go to this religious leader who probably used quite a bit of manipulation on him. He felt like she was relieving his pain, if you will. I feel like I know where this is going.
blamed the Anglican Church of England and Marie and her religious group for effectively convincing Michael he was possessed with demons, which caused him to act out violently and kill his wife. And so ultimately, Michael would be found not guilty by reason of insanity, and after only 4 years of psychiatric care, he was released. And today, he is still living free in Ossett. But despite the legal outcomes of this case, there are many people, both religious and not religious, who believe the Michael Taylor case is one of the only true demonic possession cases in modern history. Also, just to close the loop, we don't know for sure if Michael and Marie were having an affair, but it is assumed they were. And so that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments section what it is and where you found it. So give us the timestamp.
I call bullshit on that. I call bullshit on that. I mean, dude was stupid for doing what he did, because obviously he got 4 years, but 4 years for real? Dude is out there living like he could literally be like, oh no, I'm possessed by demons again. I'm not happy with Marie anymore because she's, reached her 30s. You know what I'm saying? Like, that could totally happen again. And they're going to be like, oh, well, he has this demonic possession condition, so I guess we just have to let him do what he does, right? That is, oh my, I'm sorry, I disagree with your assessment. I don't think that's a real demonic, because I don't think that there is such a thing, to be honest with you. I mean, it's one of these horror tales that we hear as religious people, that it could potentially happen to you. But I don't know that that can really... I don't know that that can really happen. I think that they were having an affair. They coordinated... Like, why did she speak in tongues? Right? Was she possessed too? Or she just understands the language, which is even weirder, right? That a religious leader would be like, oh yes, I totally understand speaking in tongues. Therefore, I know exactly how to calm him down. I call bullshit on this story. Dude was not possessed by demons, and shame on the Church of England for supporting that bullshit.
And if you're the first to do that, we'll pin you at the top of the comments section. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please go to the like button's place of work 1 minute before closing time, and then proceed to browse around for about 30 minutes and then leave without buying anything. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications.
Dude was mad he got confronted in public. He was so mad at her that she followed him to that meeting and confronted him in front of all the people that he felt that he had created this great relationship with. This should have been murder one. This should have been premeditated murder one. Because that's some bullshit, dude. He did this whole fucking act so that he could get rid of her, because he was having an affair. That's my opinion on this subject. I think that sometimes we have to think more rationally than going with our religious superstitions. Oh my God, with this one.